Przedstawiam absolutnie wybitną i szalenie inspirującą badaczkę kultury, wizualności Mieke Bal.
Powitajmy gromkimi brawami. Mieke Bal.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to be here again. I have a sort of an in-depth, although not very frequent, relationship with this museum that started in New York when I met Jaroslav Suhan in a conference, and we hit it off immediately, and it was a very nice conversation. And before I knew it, he invited my video installation, Madame B, which is based on Flaubert's novel, and for an installation in this museum. And Kasia was the curator with some other people, but mainly her. And it was such a wonderful, like almost a homecoming, to be with people who care for art and who want to exhibit it in the best way and not make exhibition something like out there and you stand in awe, but to immersive, making you stay with the art and respond to the art. So if you expect me now to do a tour and explain all the art, you better go. Because I was here for the first installment in 2014, but I don't have a clear memory of all the changes. I think it's very different. And what I particularly find interesting is all these oblique walls that look like chaotic. And chaos is a bit my interest. So I thought that this was really interesting, that the idea of an atlas has become nothing to do with geography, nothing. It's about domains of what matters in our sense of modernity and how we relate to it in different aspects, emotions, events, fears, all sorts of things. And the art, the function of art is not to be beautiful and to make you admire it, but to make you think and respond. So what I'm going to offer you is nothing like a lecture, but it is more like, what do you think of this? And make you think, and hoping that you will be interested in doing that and speaking about it. But you basically will speak, and I will speak too, between you and the artwork. And so the artwork is the second person. And so you don't talk about it, but you talk to it. And that makes it a very different experience. And this is how I had proposed to do this. It's called a tour, but no, the term is not so adequate. We have chosen two parts of this geography. The one is tradition. And of course, when you talk about modernity, it's sort of anti-tradition. So what we are interested in is how old traditions resurface and how the revolutionary modernist art either hits it over, dumps it, or responds to it, and also adopts it in a way. And there are moments that you will see that this is very much based on that tradition. What does that have to do with modernity? Well, there are aspects to these works where that is different from the tradition. So there is nothing really truly traditional in the sense of obedience to tradition, but there is a lot of responding to tradition. So in that section, between the art and the traditions it evokes or calls on, there is also this first-person, second-person dialogue. So the whole point of this whole visit is dialogue between you and the art, between us, between the art and other art, and the tradition. And then the other section that we are going to visit is, of course, also totally inevitable. It's called Catastrophe, and it's really the place of, you could say, history, but catastrophe in history, in relation to art. How can you make art in situations of catastrophe is a question that always comes up. And we will visit in this order, first tradition, then catastrophe, some of the works. And I will just, because I know that you're not going to shout it out immediately, I'm going to point out a few things, and then hopefully I can count on you all to pick it up and contradict me, for example. That's always welcome. There's nothing more educational than criticism. I love to be criticized because then I know I will do better next time. So don't fear to speak up. And do keep in mind that I'm not a connoisseur of this kind of art. But I think it is important, and this museum is unique, I think, in the world in its collection, the richness of the collection of modernist art and artifacts. And I'm just very pleased and grateful that you invited me to do this. Shall we go? Oh, and one thing, at the end we go 2 floors down. Have you told them that?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. I made a film here in Bush a year and a half ago, the week before the lockdown, with the film school. On their invitation. And some of the people from the film school are actually here this afternoon. And they have been a fantastic cast and crew, and it was a very great pleasure to see them again. But that film is on a loop in the first floor, and it's only 30 minutes. And I propose that after the hour of this tour, we go down. Whoever wants to go and see the film watches the film, and I will sit not far from there to respond to your responses and answer your questions. Is that a good plan?
Okay.
Okay, let's go then to tradition. When I saw this first, I thought, yes and no, a landscape. It's a landscape, but it's not a landscape, because that church it's not in the distance, it's like in a box. And I found that so strange. What does a church do in a box? And then you look closer and you think, there is all that green, so that might be grass or plants. But then in the green is the yellowish, the ochre color. And what the hell, is that also the ground? Or is that a barn? Is that a building? Go figure. I cannot give you the answer. And that is precisely the point, I think, of modernist painting, that they give up on the sort of the realistic depth of field and perspective, and instead they make these planes. And one of the things about modernism is, of course, flatness. But it is not just flatness. It's playing with flatness and playing with the tradition of perspective and depth. And that play is what makes it modernist. So they don't fall for the realistic illusion, but he doesn't throw it all out, he evokes it. And I think that makes this work more than just a landscape. Any responses? Comments? Can you see? I'm very glad that so many of you came, but can everybody see it?
For me, the eye catch of this picture is this part,
Yes.
and this one.
Yeah.
And this is irritating because it is a landscape that, as you said, we have something like movement because of it's maybe a part of a road.
Yeah, with the little car. Yes.
But this car, this part, something like, I don't know, a form.
Yeah.
It's like something that doesn't match with the landscape.
Yeah.
That's the eye catch
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
In this picture.
Yeah. So there seems to be a contradiction.
Yeah.
And that contradiction is what makes you think, what is this? And so this is not a painting that you can just admire. I don't even think it's that beautiful, among you and me. Huh? It's a crazy thing, but it is also very meaningful, and your eye catch is absolutely right, and there may be a little sign or a car on that road. And the interesting thing in terms of the flat plains is also that this is flat enough that it could be a barn, but then there is this corner that follows the road. Where does that leave us? I think that is the power. It's not beauty, but power that this thing shows us. And that has to do with its dialogue polemic between the tradition of the three-dimensional landscape representation and the, almost cubist. It's not cubist, but it has that flat form that makes it difficult to see if it is just a plane, if it's part of the ground, or if it's a barn. We don't know, we're not allowed to know. We're not supposed to know. You're supposed to be surprised. And I think that that is what works. Any other comments? No?
The form of the church is very characteristic.
Yes.
And it's very specific. It's not a traditional Polish church. It's like more of the Orthodox. And there are no people. So you can think also about the connection between the landscape and the sort of sacrum in a way. So maybe it's not a barn, but maybe it's just a mystical, let's say, feels when you're thinking about the playing between the light and the yellowish colors. You can think about landscape that is connected to people, but still it's a little bit natural when you're thinking about where the bread is coming from. Yeah. So my question was, there are fields, there is a road, there is a church, but where are the people? So maybe it's more about the feelings, the transcendental feelings that you can get when you're connecting with nature and the landscape.
Maybe. That's a good possibility to think about. I also had this very brief, just a flash of an intuition that it might be a toy, the church. If you look at the dimensions, could be a toy church. But you're right, there are no people. But every time that you think, so it's about planes, rectangles, something else happens, like here the curves. No, I think it's a thinking image, in the sense that it makes you think, doesn't it? So, shall we move to the next? It's a very strange sculpture. I first thought that must be a contour, but no, it's not. But it is a memory image. And here, the idea there, we were talking about, stereotypical ways of representing that were ruptured. Here you could say it's a memory image, but of what? According to the information, it's a memory of his first communion. And we all know what that means in this country. First communion, 6 years old. He looks a little older. And then it turns out that his work itself was his graduation work in art school. So he is older. He's a child, but it's a memory of the child. But he is, in fact, older. He doesn't look particularly cheerful, does he? And to have pins in your heart is not a very pleasant experience. But I was completely taken by this sort of table that could also be a coffin. And then there is this lace. What the heck is that lace doing there? And you see then that there are these folds in so it is textile, but in plaster. So he's playing with the material as much as with the time frame. Before, when he was a child, and then when he is in the beginning practicing artist, and a sense of pain and a sense of resignation. So it's up to you to fill it up with your own memories of pain and resignation. We don't have to poke into his personal life. That would be very immodest. But we all have memories of painful events and, and resigning ourselves to, oh God, I have to do this first communion, or I have to do the dishwashing. I will do it. Okay. That's his look. And it hurts his heart. And I invited you to come closer. It's a little difficult for all of you to come. But in the back, there's something very disturbing. There's something liver-colored coming out through a hole in the jacket. and on the top there is a thumbprint. So someone has taken him violently by the neck and say, come on, do your work, or something. And all those ambivalences show, from my view, show in the sort of the facial expression, like, okay, no, sort of weakness, almost falling apart. Yeah, it's really interesting if you have the patience to go around to see the back of this sculpture. And I find also would it be grass or nails?
Both.
Yes, right. So it's all, I would say this is all about ambivalence. Ambivalence, because the memories of childhood, of course, you also have the tendency to be fond of those memories, but then they were not all so cheerful. And that also comes back when you think about it. So, yeah, now the question of the tradition here is, I would say, the combination of the Catholicism of the First Communion and the educational strictures of the system of schooling, where you always have to work hard and be a good student, and if you're not, you fail your exam. So I find this a powerful work, and part of that is also the brokenness of the jacket, the dirtiness of it, and all that makes the ambivalence stronger. I don't know if he did that on purpose. Of course he did. I mean, there's no way he would deliver a brand new white plaster object, but it is a little, the dirtiness, I think, is part of the ambivalence. Any comments? No? Then we can, yeah?
The hole is a wound.
The hole is, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a wound, and the pins emphasize that. Pins stand for pain. That's you know, there is somewhere a work that's completely consists of pins. That is also of pins. Sorry, but pins mean pain, and there are lots of artists who use pins to make that point. And here also, yes. No, of course, it's a wounded, a broken heart. So maybe between the First Communion and the graduation, he broke his heart. Happens to a lot of people. You fall in love, he or she rejects you, paf, broken heart. Could stand for that. But
we all have one picture in mind when we look at this and think about heart in the context of of this communion thing. We receive small pictures with Jesus, with the heart, open heart.
Oh yeah, the bleeding heart, yes.
And it's
yes.
very exposed.
Yes.
In these little religious pictures. And it's
yes.
maybe something like a connection to this
yeah.
sort of picture.
It's certainly an allusion to that, yes, yeah. to Jesus and the bleeding heart, and you know that's almost a cliche in Christian. Yeah. In the Christian imagination. But on the other hand, as the section tradition wants us to understand, it makes no sense to just reject it all. You can be anti-Catholic, you can do other things, you can be whatever you want. I'm not going to say you have to do this, but it is the beauty of modernist art is that ambivalence brings it alive. So, yes, there is an allusion to Christianity. But no, it's not preaching. It's not at all preaching. This doesn't look like someone who is preaching for the First Communion as an important event. On the contrary. So this is the ambivalence, and I think the whole section tradition plays with the ambivalence. The different possibilities. And this is why I was hoping that you would feel that and speak to it for yourself. You don't have to speak up if you don't feel like it, but you can. But you have your own responses. Yes?
But there are so many different, I would say, images it plays with.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the one that we all have in mind. It is the photograph taken when we have, most of us had, this first communion, right? And this schema.
Yeah.
That is a boy, and this small table really used to be used by the photographers, right? And the gesture, that all was taken from the experience.
Yes.
But the symbols that are employed here are truly multifaceted, I would say. And
Yes.
for me, personally, this religious level is somehow most conspicuous here, right? And the ambivalence,
Yeah.
deep ambivalence. And one more thing that that is striking for me is that there is one more wound here on his knee. Right?
Yes, yes.
And it is just so boyish, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. You fall on your knees all the time as a child. I remember the big crusts.
Of course,
Ooh,
but it
yeah.
somehow clashes with this wounded heart and pins with
Yes.
in it.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you bring up photography, because you see that there is a First Communion photograph on the table that he might even be unveiling by pushing away the cloth. Maybe it's under the cloth, and he is sort of inaugurating the photograph of his own First Communion. I don't know. We can speculate what we want, but it does make sense that that photograph has the same structure as the sculpture. And that is important, I think, for the work of art as a work of art. It's not a document. Art is never a document. It's always something else, something more, and this is what you see in that ambivalence. Yes. Next. Yes? No, go ahead, go ahead.
Also about a passage of time.
Yes.
Because his face seems old, and maybe he misses being this young, innocent boy, but at the same time he knows that there's a lot of pain and suffering coming.
Yes.
Yes, and he
That's
cannot
a good
go
point.
back, and he
Yeah.
cannot get rid of it. So it's still.
That is a great
awaits
point.
him.
Yeah.
He knows that.
So it's also about the ambivalence of time. Now, my film downstairs is all about that, going back and forth between past and present. So he's practically warning us. It's not all going to be fun, and it's not all going to be joyful. There is that ambivalence, and the fact that he looks older than the communicant, we call it, the kid communicating, that makes it more powerful in that sense. But then you look at the pants and the children's pants. So it is about time going to the future and back to the past. I think that's a really good point.
In terms of tradition, it also depicts how it breaks with the tradition of depicting children always amused.
Yes.
And how he knows, even in those two pieces of art, when we have photography that depicts only children smiling, and how he already knows what's going to happen.
Yes.
How it breaks with the scheme of art only showing joyful
Yes.
children
And beauty.
and beauty.
Yeah.
This was like easy
Yeah.
amused.
No, that's a good point too. Yes, it is. It's not a child. It's a memory of a child, not a happy one. But it's not a child, because then there would be the smile, probably. That is a really good one. So where was that series of the Kasia? The series of all these interiors with the people. I would like that to go to that, because that's also, we talked about not smiling. I want to quickly draw your attention to the series of photographs, including the seriality of it. When you look at it, they are all staged persons. They're all one. They're all alone. They're all in their own environment, probably, and it all looks a bit not particularly beautiful, and there is not a single one that smiles. So they're alone, they're in their own place, they're staged, sitting, Probably they are not smiling because they have work to do and they feel obliged to sit for this photographer, but it is a very poignant series of, I would say, working class life. And that includes always working, always being on stage in a sense as a worker, and we see that in the back there, and also the stiffness of posing, which is a way of saying something about photography in a critical way. And of course this was the age that photography was really big, but these photos are not snapshots. And the fact that they are a series, that there are 16 of them, all in the same pose and all in the same atmosphere, makes for a seriality that also says something about the seriality of working life. The workers having, go every morning to the work and come home exhausted and the day is over, and that sort of seriality is also implied in this for me. But that's something that you see or you don't. You can also say, oh, this is beautifully composed. In a sense it is. I wouldn't mind having this as wallpaper in a room, but then closer to each other. But it is for me it's a very poignant expression of, or presentation of, working class life. And a critique of it. This was also the time of modernism, the social critique came up very strongly, and that was also, I didn't even study the dates and all that. This is not so early, but I think it is important that she saw the sort of the stiffness of that life. And of course, I don't know anything about her, but she may have had suffered from it herself, and as many women do in their traditional housewifey culture. I don't know, and it's not all women, but the stiffness and the loneliness and the fatigue come across. And the fatigue can be from the working or from the not working, from the boredom. The housewife life is also, there's a lot of boredom in that. So it could be anything that prevents people from smiling. Yes? Yes? Yes?
Was there a question about comments? Because I didn't hear very well.
Yeah.
But I think that they also draw attention to the portraiture as a genre and somehow question it, because we see the people portrayed in the context of the surrounding that can define their identity. But the question is, how much is it about the likeness, how much about identity and the relation between the object and the person? So the genre is also...
Yeah, I think that is exactly the question that it raises, rather than answering it. I wouldn't call this portraiture in the sense that portraiture would have a larger head and less of the rest. But your question is very pertinent in that there is a sense of likeness in the stiffness of the pose. And that makes it, in a sense, that's why I see it as the portraiture of life, of a lifestyle, and rather than of particular people. Of course, if you go closer, you see them all, and you see that they are different. It's worth it. It's a way of honoring these anonymous people, to go close and to look and to see if you see the difference. But you have to overcome first the stiffness of the pose, which makes it very difficult to engage the people as people. And I think that is part of the point. Not that she doesn't want you to see people as people, but she wants to show how difficult it is to see people as people when they are locked up in the spider web of this everyday labor life. And that's why I would say it cannot be portraiture.
Yeah.
But it does evoke it.
Yeah, that's why I didn't
Yeah.
say portraits, but
No.
refer to that.
No, I'm grateful for your comment. It's a very useful comment, and it makes us think more about what kind of art this is. And the social side of it becomes even more powerful by it, yeah. And if you compare that to the stately portraits of, you know, the powerful people, then you know what we mean and what Sophia means. Is that Sophia? Yes. Yes. Okay. For once I know a name and I know.
Maybe it's also polemical to the traditional approach in photography towards typology and classification when we're thinking about the Düsseldorf school and the photography movement regarding Bernd and Villa Becher and Nicolas Grospierre, when they're making this systematical photographical sociological registration of a situation. She's adding all those contrasts. It's very dramatic. There are also those vignettes in the corners. So there's also this additional value, the very dramatic and romantic also in a bit, that is not there because they are rather very minimalistic and it's very raw in style.
Yeah, I think it's too raw for that. But it is true that you could see in it a typology, an anthropological typology, but I see more a critique of that because of the relentless stiffness and the lack of smiles, that there's no way you can idealize this. And that makes it different from the traditional typology. But yes, that is evoked. And that's what I think is so wonderful about this exhibition, about this tradition section, is that you constantly see things, oh yes, but I've seen this, and these associations come up, and you feel that it's different, but they are there. And that makes the art multi-sensuous, multi-semantic, and makes it strong. Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think that from the, let's say, more anthropological point of view, we could look at the people and their situation. It is 1978. Right?
It's pretty late.
Elderly people. Yeah. A photographer coming to them, to very, very, very poor places. Look, they are very orderly, I would say. Yeah? Everything is cleaned up. Yeah. And for them, it is a kind of a celebration. Somebody came just to take a photograph. They don't smile. So they don't smile. They don't smile. But have you? Maybe, well, you are younger, but if you look at people at the photographs of elderly people taken a few decades ago, they never smile. Yeah. They never smile. They are much more serious, and it is a kind of a serious celebration, right? So it's not just like us that we have millions of photographs, really.
Well, I have to say,
maybe one of 10 photographs. This lady had, this lady was taken during her lifetime, so it is something totally different.
But wouldn't a celebration involve more people, and not this utter loneliness?
Yeah.
But I would say it is just like experiencing.
For me, it's opposite. They look like they are in the trap. On each photo is one person in the room or a home, and they are trapped somehow. But they're trapped in their social situation. Yes. They can be promoted somehow.
But I think it is not contradictory what we are talking about, because a celebration is somebody
comes. If the situation is okay for them, it could be
as far as I know, Zofia Rydet was coming to the very remote places.
So it was a solemn, there was a solemn moment.
Yes, definitely.
Celebration sounds to me more cheerful than
maybe
I can read in there.
Word,
but solemn.
Ritual in a way.
There is a ritual.
But she forbade them to smile. So it was her concept.
Well, that we weren't there. You can say that, speculate, but we don't know this. I am very much against speculating about the intention of the artist, because we don't know that, we weren't there. What we see is what we see. Unsmiling faces, all in the same situation, stiffly sitting on a chair in a homey environment. Pretty grim. For me, it's pretty grim. But maybe for many of you, it's not. You're not
grim. It's also voyeuristic.
Voyeuristic, yeah, to look into their private lives. Yeah, it has that a little bit. But then the staged sitting also suggests that they welcome it. And so there comes the celebration that I see more as a solemn moment. But I wouldn't say, I don't know. I think it's a very poignant series, and the seriality is part of it, of a kind of life that this artist is putting forward as critical, as we should be critical of. It's not, that's why I'm not convinced by the word celebration. It's not a cheerful life.
Yeah,
definitely not. No.
Cheerful, but something also important.
Important, yes, important.
Something estimated.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't see them only in the most representative rooms, but also in like the most intimate with beds and like the parts the room we see are connected to most private life.
But they didn't have different rooms.
Yes, but I mean just the wall, for example, just changing so as we cannot see the bed.
Mm-hmm.
But there are 2 or 3 pictures when the beds are focused. So
well, it's
maybe it's a solemn moment, but also we are coming, like we take a look at the most private life of those people. Of course.
I think the fact that we talk about this, that so many of you come in, says something about the work and its power.
Very touching.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's different. That's why I wanted to show you this. It's incredible, and what you make of it, that's up to you. And that depends also on your own visual baggage, your own childhood maybe, how you have been raised, in what sort of atmosphere and social class, all that. What do I know? I don't need to know that. You have your own visual baggage, the messiness of some of the walls and all that, and there's this pile of stuff here that, buckets and things. I wouldn't like to have that in my living room when this artist comes to make a solemn portrait of me, but
it's probably the only room the woman had.
Yeah, that may
she
be.
Needed the stuff.
Maybe, yeah.
To get rid of it.
Yeah. I want to go on a little bit, because of the time frame, to the other side of tradition. There's not the other side, but the religious side of tradition, and see what we can make of that. But there are a few images here that are related to Judaic traditions. It says, it's called My Parents. And you see this woman, again, not so cheerful, pointing up to her husband, who is pointing to a Hebrew prayer. So this is about religion. But at the same time, make sense of these bare breasts that look also a little dubious, and the buttons that are behind the breasts. I don't get that. And then this whole portion here that is completely, sinning against all the rules of figuration, of figurative art. What is it? Are these navels? No, of course not. But they are a little out of place, right? And this whole thing, the parents, the man on top, the woman on the bottom, but she sends us up to the Father, and he sends us up to his Father, the God, and the prayer. And so I find this, again, very ambivalent, and in an interesting way, an ambivalent picture of something that is a tradition. And you said that it was also very Polish. I don't know enough about Polish traditions to make that distinction, but it is clearly related to Judaism, related to the sense of the artist being the kid of these people, to this subordination, And I also find the narrowness of the painting somehow significant, as if they don't even fit in the frame. And that is sort of an anxiety, sort of claustrophobic. It's a claustrophobic image in a sense. And then you have almost, I wouldn't say the opposite, but something very different here. Again, you immediately recognize the traditional image, right? Whether or not you read the title, it's Joseph and Mary on the way to Egypt with the baby somehow. There is this bow, this ark. Now, the ark is often the entrance into a city. But hey, wasn't the flight to Egypt through the desert? In my memory, it was. But I wasn't there, so what do I know? But the interesting thing is that he looks sort of determined but angry, and she looks a bit longing back, nostalgic, to why would she have to leave, you know? And what is she leaving behind? A crowded city of skyscrapers. We don't mind anachronisms. I love anachronisms. I think that's very significant to say, okay, what they leave behind is a crowded city with buildings that don't quite fit. At the same time, the tradition it also alludes to is, of course, Cubism and the whole aesthetic of these squares and rectangles. And the colors are also quite, important. Like, of course, she would be in blue. Mary not in blue, unthinkable. But the easel and Joseph, they all have different colors, and the buildings have many different colors, but not very bright, not very, ostentatious. There's ochre and there's blue, and it's a little muted. And then there is this ark, the entrance to the city, or the curtain of a theater. Make of it what you like, but it is an interesting mixture of a traditional, very traditional topic, theme, and sort of an avant-garde aesthetic. And that is, I think, what matters. Now, you can interpret that, again, in your own way. You can say, okay, that means that avant-garde is still holding on to this age-old myth or tradition. Or you can say the opposite. It's also undermining it. That is entirely up to you. I think it is a very, it's a lovely painting. It again has a sort of claustrophobic composition in that the houses are cut off, even the tail of the easel, donkey, right? There's a donkey. The tail is cut off, and the ark or curtain is also cut off. So it's also like this one, but in a very different way. It's a bit claustrophobic, and that's one of the things with painting and photography also, and film, is that you can play with the frame as being a limit or an opening to something else. You know, the out of frame idea in film and photography is you go beyond the frame. And that is what is there that has been cut off is the question that the cropping brings up. Evoked the raising of Lazarus. Well, if you don't read it, you don't know. But that's apparently the theme. And so then, because my first thought was that this was Christ. But no, it's Lazarus. And so where is Christ who brings him back to life? Well, you figure it out. That is, could be this one with the beard, could be anyone. It could be here. And that is on the way to abstraction, which is also part of the avant-garde and the early modernistic revolt against traditions, but at the same time reworking them. And that is, of course, because you cannot just throw away traditions. That would be too easy. But holding on to them is also too easy. And of course then this one I wanted to show you. Oh, because I'm very fond of stories from the Hebrew Bible that have a feminist problematic. Abraham, Sarah told Abraham to sleep with his slave Hagar because she couldn't conceive a child and they needed a child. And then she got a child, Ishmael, but meanwhile she got pregnant and there was Isaac. What do you do? Well, she said, get rid of her and of him. Get rid of these. And so this is one of those stories that interest me as a sort of a misogynistic, anti-feminist ideology. Like the woman will first tell him to do it and then cast her out. That's pretty cruel. In the desert. They almost died. It's all a story. It's not real, but anyway, the narrowness is almost like in a book. Right, this thing. It's narrow. It's on textile, but the woman looks back, Hagar, and the child is sort of in revolt, and then later he became the father of Africa, of the black race, if you believe it, huh? And anyway, so this child survived and became powerful. And here he is on the total bottom of the image because he's the reject. And of course we can say, how dare she to Sarah? But you can also say, what a coward to Abraham. The coward to obey his wife twice in a contradictory command. So who is boss here? But you can also say, what did they imagine happened to the world that they come up with a story like this? Because of course it's fiction. And I think that is also part of what we need to think about when we interpret images, that, you know, it's mostly fiction, and fiction means making. So it is a way of making the world in the way the writers like to make it. So it's nothing to do with the characters themselves, it's just an imagination. And this is, for me, very important that we realize that. I call it now figuration, a figuration of an imagined situation. And you depict it in a way that makes it almost believable, but not really, because for that it's too avant-gardistic in style. And then before, yeah, well, we can go on and on. I love this painting because it is so totally crowded. It's supposed to be a landscape. Well, there is maybe a little bit of grass here, but landscape wouldn't be the word I use. I would say it's rather sort of a mess of semi-collapsed buildings. And that is done in beautiful, beautiful palette, beautiful colors, and that makes it more than whatever you try to say it is. I don't see a landscape. I barely see cottages. I just see colors and some lines and some planes. So this is another way of dealing with the avant-garde aesthetics as there's nothing about realism here. It's totally like these animals. They're like cutouts from children's games. And that is exactly what they are trying to do, to make it unreal. The unreal quality of these paintings is what makes it powerful. And then the last one, and then we have to move quickly to the catastrophe. This is the boat on which Witold Gombrowicz left before the Second World War. And you know, there are many stories. I even made a film about a story like this. Many stories of the boats on which the last Jewish refugees were capable of leaving, were able to leave. And this work for me has two very special features. One is that sort of monstrous coming at you. There's disproportionate scale. And the other is the little arrow pointing to Gombrowicz. That's sort of cute, right? And he made it, so he could write all those novels and plays. That was nice. But the boat and the red bottom of it, and the red on the top, and there's these red dots. Everything red in that context makes me a little nervous. Suggests violence, death, you know. But it's a lovely story in a bizarre painting. And I think the disproportionate size, the scale of this painting is what makes it avant-garde, makes it different from any tradition. Okay, let's go to catastrophe quickly. This is this flag, this white flag. As an artwork, you can think what you want. I kind of like it, but the content is important. It's about women protesting against environmental catastrophe and you know, and other violations of human rights. They're all Latin America, I think, Latin American, and from very different ethnicities, which is another of those horrible words that we cannot always avoid, but is problematic. But what I really see, the important thing is the multitude. And if you don't see the multitude, you will see it in this portion anyway. That protests are multiple. There are many, many protests, and there should be, but there are. And this is what this work is telling us. Yes? A little more? Yeah?
Yeah,
The contour? No?
here.
Yeah. This is an element of this larger installation, right? A large installation of all these benches with dead people coming back to school. As an attempt to, and this is why I'm interested in it especially, it's a scene. He's you know, a metteur en scène, how do you call it, a theater director. He makes a scene of dead people reading a book. This is a German book. He looks a little, the clothing looks almost a little militaristic. I don't know what to make of it, but the point of it is that time cannot be reversed. You cannot really go back to childhood, as we just saw with the boy in the First Communion, but you can remember. And these people who are dead, they come back to remember. And this is what he is imagining, or imaging, I call it now. He's imaging a child who is too small for the lectern. He can barely surface over it, so he is very small. But at the same time, he looks totally adult. And that is, that's that time going back and forth between past and present. And then not to speak of future, which is the most threatened of the times. But I think this is a really important work because it is also not generically determined. Is it a sculpture? Is it an installation? Is it a scene? Is it... You can't pin it down. And I think that is the force of the work, that you cannot pin it down. You cannot say it's this. The ear looks ancient, and the neck and the hands. So it is not a child. But the size suggests a child. And the fact that it is both makes time, you could say, anti-linear. I have been playing with the word preposterous, pre and post changing places, in an argument that contemporary art reshapes, reinterprets old master art. And here you have all these works where you also feel that there is a time, a tension in time. And this is clearly one of those cases. And of course, we don't have to ask what tradition it is, school. This installation with the noise, and don't ask people to dust it, because it should be dirty and scraped off and all that. I wanted to dust it, but she said no. And the sound is a way of, it's called God is not dead, huh? Or he is dead. There is no God. Yes, something about God and negative. I'm not so well versed in these things, but it is a crazy kind of sculpture or installation, and the sound it's not so loud, thankfully, but it has that militaristic rhythm. That was the first thing when I heard it, was that militaristic rhythm of the sound that immediately suggested to me catastrophe. No? Because what's militarism other than violence and killing? So I can't say I like the thing, but it seems an important work. It seems important, and it seems to do something that not all works do. So imposing a presence, both in its scale, in its dustiness, and in the sound. It imposes itself, its presence. So there is no God, so what is there? You figure it out, you make your choices. So this artist was interested in Cobro, right? Yes. I'm also interested in Cobro, but not at all in this kind of work. I think Cobro is fantastic, but this is a very painful work, because the rubber of the tires suggests flesh, and the iron suggests violence. The iron is capturing the flesh, so it seems it's an abstract work, sculptural again. I'm interested in sculpture, as you could tell, but it's also abstract in the sense there's no representation. So we can speculate that, yeah, it's hurtful. That's your emotional response. It hurts, like with the boy and the heart and the pins. It hurts, but it is not a representation of violence. You cannot say, okay, this is the weapon and this is the body, and but it does suggest it. So I wanted you to see this work as a way of thinking about how art evokes thoughts and emotions without representing them. And this is also part of the avant-garde's innovation, that they gave up of a lot of the traditions of representation. But what did they do instead? With colors, with other kinds of shapes and all that. And here there's not even color. It's completely, I don't know what. And that gives it the power. It makes you think and feel. More feel than intellectual think. So it's emotional thinking is what it stimulates. And that I find powerful. I don't see any connection to Cobro, but I have a bit of a fondness of Cobro that's also a bit stereotypical. But okay, so you can speculate what you want. The last videotape. This was made when videotapes were still very vital as a technology. And so what does he do? He burns it, and he burns the case, saying it's finished. So from the perspective of the time of making, it is a futuristic work. It is predicting. Like the prophecy you will see in the Cassandra film, the prophecy of the end is in this work. And when we see it now, we say, oh yeah, get rid of these things. They're completely out of obsolete. But the whole idea of obsolete, think that through. Why would everything have to be obsolete? Why is my 6-year-old iPhone obsolete? People say, get a new one. Ridiculous that you still have that one. And I think that whole notion of obsolete is also part of the whole ecological crisis, and the sense that we don't know what we are doing with the earth, but also with our own things. And so in that sense, this work is very well placed in this exhibition, although the artist would probably not have a clue about this. probably, I don't know. But it is very well placed because this is all about this going back to the past of the avant-garde that goes back to other pasts and then brings it back in a new time frame. And, well, any comments?
I think in the context of catastrophe, both of those artworks, like this one inflicts pain.
Yes.
Like in the moments of catastrophe, art should not talk about pain, but should inflict pain. And this one evokes nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like not talking about memories, but just make you suffer a bit.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Nostalgic.
Yeah. No,
And
that's
like the
absolutely, yeah.
Emotions.
The point of art is to do precisely that. Either make you suffer, make you long, make you desire, make you, but it does something, it makes you do something, including thinking. I love to think, and I think thinking is a wonderful occupation. So for me, if an artwork makes me think, I stop before I tend to make a conclusion. And I think, would it mean this or that? Oh, no, stop. The effect of make you think is what is more important. And that's the same with this. And the other one there. So this work has 2 dates on it. And this is part of what I'm interested in the going back and forth in time. It was made as a sculpture in 61. And it was like probably a dead body, but it had candles next to it, which is a signal of, mourning, a sign of mourning. And then I don't know if that was through the candles that it caught fire, but it caught fire. And this is what happened. This was what was left of the sculpture. So that was 12 years later or something? 13 years later. And what I find incredibly remarkable is that the artist said, yes, this is a new date for a new work, but let's keep it. So the artist had a very strong sense of the power of destruction as a way of making art. And it does look like a dead body from burning, right? Someone has burned. And I would say it's a totally different work from what it was, but the artist accepts that difference as part of the process of art making. And that, I think, is also important, to have that sense that art is not forever, art changes, the ephemerality of art, but also this, the destruction. And, at the moment in Paris, in the Musée Pinot, this new museum, there is a huge Baroque sculpture with candles in it. It's made of wax. And during the whole show, which is now months already, they burn. So every once in a while, an arm falls off or something else, something happens to the sculpture. It is slowly disintegrated. And that disintegration in slowness is, of course, a recollection of what happens to stone, for example, in rivers, or to the earth. That slow disintegration. And I thought that was really a powerful reminder of that. And this I find also strong in that sense. Okay. So I think we have to go, right?
Yeah, it's 5:15.
Yeah, so we have to go. If you have more questions, I will sit next to the cinema on the first floor. And you can see the film, I hope you do. It was all made in Łódź, with all Łódź people. And you will see what the people you have in that film school. And then I will sit there and answer your questions if you have any. Okay? Okay, well, thank you for your attention.